was an author, James Wasserman, who did a really good interpretation of the Book of the Dead. Wasserman wrote this fantastic guide to the occult, the visual iconography of the occult traditions. And the way that he started the book was that man is the shadow of God, and God's propensity for creation is reflected in man in our desire to create. And we create, obviously, in a lower dimensional form, but our impulse, like you said, our impulse to create imagery is, theosophically, this hologram of the divine impulse. The other thing you were mentioning was, well, first of all, when you talk about primitive art, the more I study this and the more time I spend with this, my idea of primitive art is a velvet Elvis or a poster of dogs playing poker, you know? That's primitive art.
Did you ever have one of those synchronicities where you learn a new word and then almost immediately someone around you says that word? This is one of those times. Here are some terms that are going to become important for you in the immediate near future. Didactic. Didactic means to teach. Didactic art is designed to teach or transmit something. Didactic architecture and didactic statuary is the same thing. Why is this important? You'll see.
Sophisticated art is art that serves a function. Art that is didactic, like we said. Didactic means to teach. That before there were books, you walked through a book. A temple was a book, and the statuary was a book. And my own experience with my whole professional life, was that I got these 10-second snippets in between Seinfeld and The Simpsons. I had 10 seconds to use some sound, color, typography, and maybe a clip, usually not any, very little narration. And I had to create a mood, and I had to create excitement, and I had to reach into the psyche and create a response. Usually, you only have time for involuntary responses. So we've talked a lot about the Vedantic color theory and how you can really manipulate a person against their will, or especially with their will if they're into it, through the use of color and sound and things like that. And so art, to me, that is primitive, is art that really serves no function except to cover a space on your wall. But the sophisticated use of art, no matter what the actual techniques of art are, the sophisticated use of art is to convey some idea. So promos on television are barely less primitive than a Velvet Elvis painting, but when you look at sacred art and didactic art, that really was the highest purpose to which art was used. And I've been thinking about, in particular, you walk into Luxor or Karnak, and you walk through those rows of sphinxes, the Sphinx colonnade, the ram-headed sphinxes. And when you consider that the reason you were going into the temple was to participate in the mystery traditions, hopefully as an initiate, but even as just the rabble would be led into the outer courtyard on occasion. And because you were going into the temple to learn about yourself and to learn the mysteries of consciousness, in light of what you found, these ram sphinxes outside of the temple were sort of like a butcher who has a picture of a pig on the outside of his place, a little neon pig head, or like a strip club that has a couple of a big double D brassiere on it, that in a way it's an iconic advertisement of what you're going to find inside the shop. And so when we posted these discoveries, we've excerpted the main discoveries to go along with the press releases we're doing, and they're online now. We're posting just the excerpts of the show that show the scientific discoveries. And when you look at those, I was expecting more resistance, frankly. Within the first minute that the thing went up, we started getting comment. And I was really cringing because I know that there's going to be a lot of hate and that there's some segments of people that are going to fight this tooth and nail and claw. But an avalanche of people who were a preponderance of art students, art teachers, a lot of highly educated artists are really resonating with this idea that the artwork was not just there for decoration. It was not just an example or a statement of mastery over stone and sculpture. It served this purpose. It communicated a message. And until you made this series of discoveries, no disrespect to Egyptology, but the world was not aware. These things have been hiding in plain sight, and as a result of what you found, it is no longer possible to dismiss our most ancient ancestors as being primitive in any way. This is incredibly sophisticated brain art, and as you pointed out, it's not just for the sake of biology, but this is particularly illustrating the parts of the brain that produce consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, it's over my own course and experience of all this stuff too. Like I've gotten to the point where I no longer care about the chronology of time. It is obviously relevant, and you get to those Venus statues, and there's 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 years old. So clearly, time is relevant to a degree. But from my own standpoint, it's just, again, like I said, John West sort of 101, and you realize that there's boom and busts, golden ages and dark ages, and this sort of thing. And so I've gotten to the point where I don't care about the chronology of history. All I care about is that this is clearly things that human beings have been able to tap into and have access to as far back as it seems like people have been able to make art. What are they making art about? They're making art about these mysteries. They're making art about the big questions. Consciousness. What do we hear? What's the meaning of life? What is the purpose of all of this stuff? And I think it's just made me realize that it's just it's an aspect of being human, of having a human brain, that we're able to tap into something and then to have the ability to. I mean, from an artistic standpoint, I make stuff with a pencil and a piece of paper. If I had to communicate the ideas that I can communicate in a poster out of stone, that I can't move and that I can't. I don't know if anybody out there has ever tried to carve something. I tried to carve a human figure one time years ago out of wax, like this hard wax that you use for making sculptures. And I'm not a sculptor. It was my first sort of foray into it. And making just a human figure with a head with just shoulders out of a block out of hard wax was surprisingly frustrating, and I gave up relatively quickly. So whenever I see Luxor or Karnak or any of these massive structures built out of stone, and they're carved amazing, they're just brilliant, and it's mind-boggling as an artist to look at that stuff and go, you did this out of stone.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be the worst material possible to choose as an artist, that this is what you're gonna use to make, and even if you carve it, how are you gonna move it? How are you gonna lift it? How are you gonna, it just seems like the last material that you would go to. This goes to show their intelligence, that they figured, like, not only are we going to pick the hardest material, we're going to make it huge. We're going to make it massive.
Yeah.
It
also speaks to this really interesting thing that should be of concern to all artists, that any artist is only as important and as timeless as the subject that he chooses. So if you happen to be an artist and you choose the Kardashians or, the latest NASCAR winner, Dale, whatever, Jr., you're going to be a very time-bound artist. But if you can choose for your subject of art timeless principles, you're more likely to be a timeless artist. We're still reading James Joyce, and we're still reading Plato and Socrates, and
we're still talking about Egypt.
And we're still talking about Egypt. And so the appropriateness of choosing the medium of stone for ideas that are truly timeless, because fashions come and go, the shapes of hats come and go, the colorful shapes of glasses change from square to round and back again. But the one thing that is a constant is brain structure, and I think the potential structure of consciousness. And so not only have we seem to have found well, first of all, what's a notorious blind spot for modern science is, where does consciousness come from? What is it? This artwork seems to be drawing our attention to the mechanical bits that produce consciousness, or the way that I've been enjoying saying it lately is the nexus between material and mind, between body and mind. That the places that you've pointed out are being shown in the art are really the nexus point where the meat gives rise to the mind. And there is no place in the brain where Brad resides, little Brad running around behind your eyes, looking out of each eye. There's two Brads, a left Brad and a right Brad.
There's one over here and there's one over here. I listen to that one way more than this guy.